Welcome back to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. This is the show that highlights the crucial importance of estate planning and why it's something that everyone really needs to prioritize. We also dive into the unfortunate consequences that arise far too often when people don't plan ahead. I'm your host, Jon Braddock, author of Click Here When I Die, and founder of My Life and Wishes, the Legacy Vault, an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. Today, I'm honored to have as my special guest, Paul Deloughery. Paul is a seasoned estate planning and probate litigation attorney with over 25 years of experience, committed to providing personalized and effective legal representation to clients throughout Arizona. He holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science from Indiana University, Bloomington, and earned his Juris Doctorate from the Iowa College of Law. Licensed to practice in Arizona, Paul is also a member of the State Bar Association and Wealth Council, and is a certified family wealth advisor. Paul is also an author. He is the author of Lasting Wealth, a revolutionary method of family wealth transfer, and Probate Made Simple. That'd be a great concept. Because usually it's not. In Lasting Wealth, he shares a personal story of inheriting a very large sum of money, and then what happened? Welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to see you. And
To
I
see
love
you.
I love your book, by the way. I have a copy.
Thank
So
you very
yeah.
much. Yeah, it's people ask me often, is that like a Debbie Downer kind of book? And it's like, no, because anyone who knows me, I have this very irreverent sense of humor,
Yeah.
and so it's that on
Yeah.
something that people should actually talk about.
Yeah.
Uh, so Paul, we got a couple of books. We can talk about those. I want to talk about lasting wealth, because you told me that you inherited a chunk of money, which I'll let you share the numbers. But would you mind sharing a bit about that and your journey, and then what really inspired you to write the book?
Sure. So I've been an estate planning attorney since around 2001, and uh, I started in Minnesota and then moved here to Arizona around 2003. Got admitted, and I was doing estate planning for very successful families, dentists, doctors, entrepreneurs, whatnot. Um, and then I have my own personal backstory where, long story short, I go into more detail in the book, but basically, I met my biological father for the first time at the age of 42. And um, he was in a nursing home at the time. He had just had a operation, and in his mind, he was going to get better. In actuality, he ended up dying 6 weeks later. I was at his side in the hospice. I mean, we only had just my first meeting with him to talk, and then after that, he really uh he couldn't communicate very well. Like he went downhill very fast, and he ended up actually having cancer that was pretty aggressive. And well uh then around the time when he was in the hospice, I figured, well, he's not going to go home. So I went to the house, kind of searching around. I mean, I'm an estate planning attorney, so I know what to look for. um he was a hoarder, and he was a Vietnam veteran, and that had I, Vietnam, I think, affected everyone who was in combat there. And so, if you can imagine, like, he had things like a gas mask by the garage door, and a shortwave radio antenna up in the attic, and different things like that seemed a little unusual or whatever. Uh, uh, he had a desk also with a fairly new, enormous computer on it, and a printer. And on top of the printer was his 2008 federal tax return. And it showed a $1 million passive income on the bottom of page one. So I knew that
Oh,
he had something. Yeah, basically, so what he had done, he had invested his military retirement in penny stocks, and that's all he did. Like he was obsessed with it and was obviously successful. When he died, he had a $28 million estate. I was the only heir. Half of that went to the government because, of course, that helps. Um, and then
exactly.
I never did get a thank you note from President Obama after sending in the taxes. I a little bit ticked off about that, but
Isn't that
uh,
something? You'd
yeah,
expect just,
you would expect something.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and I proceeded then over the coming years to um, lose most of the money. And now I'm an experienced estate planning attorney at the time. I've done probate litigation. I mean, I'm relatively intelligent, I think. But just the short version is I was just unprepared, and I think I think a lot of people uh, uh, just assume that if they came into money, they would know what to do with it. Everything's like and back years ago when you used to have like the National Enquirer and tabloids by the checkout lines, they don't do that anymore. But a typical thing on the front page would be this sports star or this actress or actor had a bunch of money and they're in bankruptcy, or they had a bunch of money and now they're an addict or whatever. And it was like
Yeah.
a shock value. And I think the idea was, for the common person to kind of walk by and think, oh, well, they were stupid. Those people are stupid. And what I found is there's well, how can I explain it? I was the same person. One day when I had $2,000 in my checking account, and then the next day I had it call it after taxes and everything, basically 14 million in an account. But I was the same person. I was the same person used to paying the same bills and used to having the $2,000 in my account. And also I kind of saw the money as a sick consolation prize, because what I really wanted was a relationship with my father. My mom had just died a couple years earlier than that. And so I didn't really, I didn't see a purpose for the money. I didn't see any meaning to it. It was just a bunch of money. And I kind of did the best I could to try to figure out, okay, how do I put some meaning on this? And what happens when you deal with a significant amount of money is there are plenty of people who will come out of the woodwork and suggest how you can put meaning on it. And a lot of times it involves different investments and whatnot. So I actually invested, or I thought I was investing the money. I was investing in oil wells in Texas around the time that the cost of oil was going down, but I didn't see that coming. I bought a historic art foundry in Naples, Italy, trying to save that. But there's a reason. There's a reason that people don't really buy museum quality bronze artwork or sculptures or that kind of thing anymore, because you can have it 3D printed nowadays. And so anyway, I mean, I don't want to sound harebrained because but they were looking back at it, they were bad investments. And that what I've here, let me kind of tie it together. So there were bad investments. I lost a bunch of money. I felt like a fool. I was ashamed. Other people looked at me like, what in the world was I doing? And it was hard for me to, I guess, explain that, because everyone else's perspective is, if I got money, I would do this and I would do that and all this kind of stuff, which may or may not be true. But statistically, most people who come into an inheritance don't keep it. And that actually makes sense if you think about it just a little bit. Otherwise, if most people who came into an inheritance kept it and grew it, everyone on earth would be billionaires, right? I mean,
Right.
over the course of time, everyone would keep inheriting and growing it and inheriting and growing it, and like all of us would have mansions. And but that's just it's not the reality. And so there's a um in the process, I had to do a lot of soul searching. And I also did some research and whatnot. It was a little bit comforting to realize that I wasn't the only idiot that came into money and lost it. Like, that's actually the norm. Um,
I was going to
and
say an inheritance is almost akin to winning the lottery, right?
right,
Because we hear all the time of these people who win the lottery, and you talk to people and they joke, "Yeah, when I win Powerball, man, I'm not going to work the next day." And so many of these
yeah.
people, unless you were fortunate enough to win the $500 million.
Well, even with that, so the funny thing about the funny thing about coming into a windfall like that, there's a couple of things. I mean, one is that, um, yeah, you're still the same person, and so someone who's accumulated money from hard work, I mean, they're a different person, and they've become a different person in the process. But if it's just a just add water kind of situation, and they're instantaneously wealthy, then they're a poor person who coincidentally has a bunch of money. And the other thing is, what's really interesting, um, like looking back on it, I met with a psychologist, you know, kind of after it was too late, but trying to sort through depression and all of this stuff. And he was kind of shocked about, how I did it, but he kind of understood, that, when it's so much money, I mean, it just seems limitless.
Right.
But it's not. It's never limitless. And you're talking about $1 billion. That's also not limitless. Like,
Right.
you can quickly blow through that just like anything else. You just buy some more expensive things. But and the other thing with money is the human brain is very creative, and so the typical person will think it. Let's dumb not dumb it down. Let's bring it down to a different level that most people can imagine. Okay, so you inherit $100,000, or that you're going to inherit $100,000. What your brain does is you think, oh well, I can put an addition on the house for $100,000. I can send all my kids to college for $100,000. I can start a new business, and I can retire to Tahiti. And in their brain, they think that they can do all four of those things, but there's only $100,000, and so they start spending and spending, and not never really realize that you can't actually do all of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It's interesting because it does. The more you explain it, it almost seems to just be a recurring theme of people who get some kind of a financial windfall, whatever it is, and
Right.
then just being unprepared
Yeah.
or mishandling it.
And then what I love about what you do is, you help organize the person, so that the next of kin, the loved ones, are more prepared. But what I've also noticed, and I just want to kind of put a bug in people's ear about this, um, what's really important is to have, is to pass on more of the values, or like something that's more foundational than even just documentation. And this really, really important. So, and I've been doing probate litigation now for over 20 years. uh, and I tell people, I've noticed almost no correlation between having all your documents in place and whether the family is going to, blow up in arguments and start suing each other. Almost no correlation. You can have a will, family fights. You can have no will, family fights, or they don't fight. And so what's the relationship? The relationship, frankly, has to do with, well, there's a couple of things. I mean, if there's anyone in the family with addiction or abuse or like psychological stuff like that, you're much more likely to have issues. And then the other thing is just having, if the family has common values or, some kind of shared understanding about the meaning to the money or how they're going to resolve differences, just some common ways of interacting like that. You can have documents or not have documents, or be signed up with your programmer. I mean, well, your program does more than what I'm talking about. You help them make sure that they can actually find things, which is great. But I'm talking about like if there's a will or uh, it, having a will or not having a will. I mean, it's always good to have the legal documents. I do estate planning. It would be it would be bad for me to say you don't have to have a will, but so have that. But what's even more important is just talking, having that communication, like having regular dinners with your kids, having get-togethers, and even if your kids are ostracized or like your daughter-in-law hates you or something like that, just try and you don't have to fix it. Okay, you don't have to fix it. Your daughter-in-law may still hate you, but just by showing the effort of trying and establishing that, I mean, it goes a huge long way.
Yeah, you're so spot on because obviously I talk with hundreds and hundreds of attorneys and people who have been through these situations. And a very common theme is families don't agree. They fight. And, Michelle and I had 6 children between us. And, raising those children, I can tell you this: we could never agree on what to eat for dinner, what movie to watch, or anything else. And the kids used to fight. And so just because they are now adults, and when I die, doesn't mean they're not going to fight. And they certainly aren't going to agree when it comes to whether it's 100,000 or 100 million on how that should be, broken up. And so the one thing I encourage our users of our platform to do is we have a section there called the Video Vault, and it's a place you can record loving messages to your kids after the fact and those kind of things, or they record an ethical will, right? Family values and those
I
kind
love
of
that.
things.
I love that.
And what I think is so important is because even though if they've got their documents and they use a platform like the Legacy Vault, and they can find things, they're still going to disagree. So by putting a video in there saying, guys, the legal documents were my wishes for how things would be divided up. This is the roadmap to that. And so if you can do me one last favor, at the end of the day is, get along, right? And, maybe they'll fight a little less. We had family members fighting over a pair of binoculars. I kid you not.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, things have sentimental meaning to people, and we have to understand that. So, awesome.
Okay.
Well, a couple other things you and I had chatted, briefly about. I've heard of situations, where I like to say the perils of getting really old. I've heard of situations where, someone convinces, an elderly person to make some last changes to their estate documents. Can you, visit with us about that, kind of address that nightmare scenario and what the aftermath of that is like?
It's just really difficult. And okay, so for the listeners or the viewers, just explaining what we're talking about. Okay, I have I always have a number of situations like this going at any one time. And I have a situation right now where there's a caretaker. I mean, this could be any of, 100 different cases, but caretaker uh, got involved, and the mom had some mental illness and was just, because of that, the um, relationship with her kids was kind of strained. And the caretaker, of course, is getting paid, so she's going to do whatever it takes to make this person happy. And because she was making the mom happy, mom decided to start giving her increasingly more and more in the will and the trust, and then took the house out of the trust and had a beneficiary deed go to the caretaker, and then that wasn't even good enough, and then like actually deeded the property, like anyway, like it was kind of like
Wow.
just one after another, making like really making sure that the caretaker got this property. Now, who was involved? I mean, that's a whole different thing. We think there was undue influence involved, but proving that is extremely difficult. There can be in Arizona, there's a presumption, and I think this is a majority rule around the country, that there's a presumption of undue influence if the person benefiting was involved in, procuring the documents or having the documents signed. So that certainly makes it easier. But if you don't have that, like in this one situation I'm talking about, the person went and saw an attorney. Now, I think the caretaker drove her to see the attorney, so she was involved, but it's still kind of a gray area. Do we have a presumption of undue influence, or do we have the burden of proving undue influence, and how do we do that? And I mean, yes, there was some secrecy involved, but it was also a recorded document. How do you keep a recorded document? How can we claim that a recorded document was secret because it was open for all the public to see? And anyway, so it just gets really complicated. And in terms of how to prevent that, boy, it's a tricky thing. It's just a really tricky thing.
And
The
then
the
families less to contest, right? Which,
Yeah, it
beyond probate and everything else, which is not an inexpensive proposition, nor is it a
oh
short proposition.
yeah,
Um, this just adds a tremendous amount more time to the
right.
process.
Oh, time and money. And as a cynical lawyer, I called it the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. So basically, yeah, the person who uh, unduly influenced the elder person and got all the money can now spend, you know, a oodle of money on lawyers to defend him or defend her. And then the family is stuck, trying to scrounge together their own money to get a lawyer to undo it. So yeah, it's extremely difficult. Um, and what's the solution? Um, Well, really, so one of the things, and this maybe goes along with what you're talking about, one of the things would be to show a history of what the person's intent was, like during the years, and I'm not just talking one document, like what would in any of these cases that I'm talking about, what would be extremely helpful, and usually we don't have it, is some history showing that they actually loved their children, even though maybe their relationship was strained or something like that. But something like that. Um, so then when there's this document out that comes kind of out of the blue a month before the person dies, that has everything going to some stranger. Then we can actually show that that was an unnatural disposition, that really the person um, actually wanted this one thing to happen, and then it's a lot easier to go to court. Yeah. Anyway, it's an extremely hard situation, and I think um, one of the things that would help more is taking more of a collaborative approach in planning. And that's kind of lacking. That's not the traditional way of doing this. Traditionally, um, mom and dad go to see an attorney, they do their documents, they get in a binder, and then they put the binder on a bookshelf. and it sits there, or or they just keep it hidden, and the kids never find out about it until later on. Um, and if it can be done more collaboratively, I've seen that actually work. Where yes, there's that can help prevent some of this other stuff from happening. It's not a guarantee, but it can definitely help prevent it.
Yeah. Let me ask this, and I don't know. It's probably not a thing, but it could be a thing. So if so, I have elderly parents, and they've got a trust. Is there any uh, protections to avoid having someone convince them to make a change to the trust? Is there almost like a trust protector, if you will? Another set of eyes or an oversight that would need to approve things.
Uh, so I talk about this in my book, Lasting Wealth. There are ways to do it, but they tend to be more expensive or more labor intensive. For example, what very financially successful families have is um, a family council. So, and the family council would be, pretty much all the adult members of the family, to get together, and it may or may not include the spouses. It may or may not include, grandchildren. So that's up to interpretation or whatever. But the council then. What you can do is actually integrate the family council into the documents where, uh, you know, obviously it makes it more awkward. I mean, for the for the parents, for the matriarch and patriarch, because usually they got the money because they're successful and they knew, they were in charge, in control. And here we're trying to like take that control away and have things run by a bureaucracy within the family, which usually goes against the grain of the typical person in this situation.
Worse than trying to take the driver's license away from them.
Yeah, but that kind of a thing can actually help though, and I've seen it. I've seen it work. If there's some way to have basically just checks and balances. You mentioned a trust protector. Trust protector is more like, I serve as trust protector of different people's trusts, and I view it more as me wanting to enforce or carry out my client's wishes. And but if my client is, like you say, wanting to give everything to the caretaker, that makes it difficult for me. What exactly am I supposed to do at that point? So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So no mystery out there. 50% of the population does not have an estate plan in place. And, obviously, as all of our listeners know, if you don't have a will or any kind of estate plan, you die intestate and probate is involved. And I talk to a lot of people and I ask them about their estate plan, and they tell me, yes, they have a will. And I ask them to describe what that does. And they actually describe what a trust would do, but they don't have a trust. They have a will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a will is great. It helps, give you that voice to direct where you want things to go, but you're still going to deal with probate, which I know from conversations with attorneys around the country. I spoke with in New York City the other day. It says it takes 2 years to get on the docket for probate. So, hey, families, if you think you're going to get that money anytime soon, you're not. And so I know probate can be expensive, long and drawn out process, and someone has to deal with it. You do. But you wrote a book called Probate Made Simple. That intrigues me. Can you tell me about the book and how you make probate simple?
Well, I mean, we try to streamline it as much as possible. Now, I practice law in Arizona, so uh, the typical probate, actually, the court system expects the probate to be done within a year. So, we have a much more streamlined process here. But Yeah, basically what we've done, we've just tried to streamline the processes as much as possible, and make it stress free for people. So, um, and we're actually just rolling out something. I haven't announced this. You're going to be the first one I announced this to, there we go, planting the flag in the ground. But no, we're going to be offering a stress free probate guarantee. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I like guarantees.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, um, so let's see what else to say about that. Well, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
basically so the book kind of just goes through what the courts, what to expect if you're in a probate and how long it takes and what you have to do and notice to creditors and paying taxes and all that kind of stuff. So trying to give as much information out there as possible, because I think a lot of people have this concept that they get appointed, they get access to the money, they can take it and be done. And then, anyway, what, as the attorney, then I'm stuck, trying to tell them, you still have to pay the taxes. There might be creditors. There might be disputes about interpreting what the will is, or, different other things like that. Like, anyway. And so, but it goes without fail. Like I send letters and I have phone calls and all this kind of stuff, telling people that no, there's actually this process. And in Arizona is pretty short. It's not 2 years like or 3 or whatever, like what you're talking about. It's really, really short. But you still have to, hold your horses and like just do some basic stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of people, they're just chomping at the bit to get that money, and and get access to it, and blow it, and because because anyway, so it's interesting.
Yeah, it sure is. Now, so briefly before we wrap up, tell me a little bit about your practice. You're an estate planning attorney, but you also handle probate. And
Yeah.
obviously, those who have been to you for estate planning and gotten a good trust in place, in all likelihood, their family won't have to deal with probate as long as it stays up to date. But can you just talk a little bit about your practice, and maybe for our Arizona audience, they might be interested to know how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, sure. Well, so you can get in touch with me. I have the name of my website is kind of funny, but here we go. So it's called Sudden Wealth Protection Law. So because I came into this sudden inheritance, so sudden wealth. There's something called sudden wealth syndrome. This thing that we've been talking about off and on during our conversation, where people tend to get money and then spend it really quickly. Not everyone does, but there's a portion of people that do. And so what I try to do with my planning work is to put some things in place so that the kids will be more responsible. So they're not going to get it in just one windfall, and they have there's different ways of going about it. That's for another conversation. But basically, where it makes it less likely that they're going to blow the money, more likely that it's going to actually help them. And here, I'll tell you an example. So this is, well, it's not an example of something I did. This is an example from my litigation practice. So a lady came to me maybe about 8 years ago, and her father had set up a trust for her, and she was, I want to say she was in her late 50s. She was in her late 50s. Okay. She had never worked a day in her life. She had basically lived off the money in this trust. And she came to me, she was furious because and I want to swear here because she was swearing, but I won't. I don't want you getting banned from YouTube. So she she was just so angry at the trustee. The trustee was a high charging lawyer, I think in Beverly Hills or something, and charged like $1,100 or $1,200 an hour or something like that. And so he was billing and billing and billing to serve as trustee, and he was also giving her monthly allowances. And now at the age of, I think it was like 58, she had about $120,000 left in the trust. And she wanted to sue him. She wanted me to sue him for what, malfeasance or something. I don't know. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, and this had happened over decades, and trying to sue him for things that had happened over decades, that's going to be really difficult. And I tried to like give her the best advice I had, which is maybe go get an education so you can start to work at the age of 58. Like that was the best thing I could think of. But what happened? Yeah, it's just so interesting. A lot of people, I think a lot of people just don't. I think a lot of people put more planning into what they're going to eat for dinner than even this. And this is set up in it. He had paid money for a trust and all this stuff, but he never thought about like step two.
Yeah.
Like what's going to happen after the money runs out, or like think it through just a little bit. So anyway, it's just interesting. And I try to think through, I try to think that I'm stumbling over my words. I try to think through things a little bit more so that hopefully that doesn't happen to people.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm. So many different things, but yeah. So, in closing, Paul, your perspective on, estate planning more than just the documents, it's really eye opening. It's about families and agreeing and not agreeing. Um, is there any advice you'd like to pass on to our listeners before we sign off?
Um, Share your estate plan with your kids. Don't make it a surprise. That's my
I like
advice.
that. That's great
Yeah.
advice. Well, thanks so much for sharing the insights. For our listeners, if you want to learn more about Paul and his work, I will in the show notes include his website, his contact information. If you're in the Arizona area, you can certainly reach out and work with him. If you're not in the area, but you like what he has to say, you can probably reach out to him because he knows
Yep.
attorneys all across the country.
Yep.
And I will also put links to Lasting Wealth and Probate Made Simple, because it doesn't matter what state you live in or where you are, both of those books are highly, highly informative. So thanks for being with
Great.
us today, Paul. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
thank you, John. I had a lot of fun.
I did as well. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm Jon Braddock, reminding you to plan today for peace of mind tomorrow.